Greetings, folks. I'm Will Lombardi, and I'm here at the Capitol Arts Gallery with the featured artist for June, Lori Reed. And Lori's what I would describe as a multimedia artist who works in paint, pottery, and fabric. Is that a fair description?
Yeah, and as many other mediums as I can get my fingers into.
I love it. So greetings, welcome, and thank you for doing this.
Thank you for having me.
My first question is simply to give some background about who you are and about your relationship to your art. Can you tell us about yourself, where you're from, where you live and work now, maybe something about your training?
I was born in Long Island, New York. Moved to Vermont when I was not quite 4. My earliest memory is the Christmas that I was 3. I received a package of colored pipe cleaners, and I remember making little animals out of them, bending them into little animals. And there's no photos of that, so I know it's a real memory because I could see myself at the coffee table doing this. And I believe I was born to be an artist. I was born to create. And my parents told me, no, you don't want to be an artist. You want to do something practical. And it's like, it took me years to get to a point where it's like, you can't tell me what I want. Because it's just always what I did. I always was, just making little things. I was very nearsighted. And I could only see like 4 inches in front of my face in focus, so I was always doing little tiny things up close. So it's kind of ironic that eventually, after doing mundane, everyday jobs like cashiering at a grocery store and stuff like that, I discovered that I can make a living in art, and I became a faux finisher, which is doing walls. And suddenly, instead of doing little tiny things, I was doing great big things. And that grew into murals, and that's been my career for more than 20 years.
I hope we get to circle back to that, because that is really fascinating to go from minutiae, detail, into this grand scale. So it seems like scale somehow is a theme in your work.
Well, I tend to just do the bigger things now. Contact lenses had a lot to do with that. But because I had to, glasses limit how you can see, and of course art is visual, and I'm a very visual person, and so it was really important to me to be able to see what I was doing, and contact lenses really helped a lot. I've also had LASIK surgery, and that didn't work for me, but anyway.
So most of your, or I shouldn't say most of your, but it seems like, from what I understand, your training was in Vermont. You were largely, after moving to Vermont as a child, you were then largely trained in Vermont? I
don't actually have a lot of training. I learned to do pottery at a place called Frog Hollow Craft Center in Woodbury, Vermont, when I was a teenager. And I apprenticed there for a couple of years. I did go to Skidmore College in New York as a fine art major, but I didn't finish college. I like to teach. I found that I can teach anything that I have been taught. Anything that I have learned, I can teach. But anything that's in me, I can't teach it. Like I can paint pictures. I can't teach you how to paint a picture. I can teach you how to sew. I learned how to sew when I was 12. But I can't teach you how to paint because I don't know how I paint. I just do it.
So if we are thinking of perhaps your evolution as an artist, you say you were doing these small sort of detail-oriented things. It sounds like you began sewing, which would be the basis for your fabric art around 12. It sounds like as a teenager you began with pottery, and then on your own you evolved into a painter. Is that?
Yeah, yeah. I could, when I was a kid, I could draw anything. I didn't do much painting. I took, I think when I was about 8, when I took a, like 4-week class at Frog Hollow with oil painting, and I did one oil painting. My sister confiscated that. It's on the back of her aquarium. It's an underwater scene. And then I took one, again, just like a 4-week or 6-week class when I was maybe 14. And I haven't ever had painting. So it just sort of, but I can draw. And so when I get into my art, it's like I'm drawing, and I can draw with almost any medium. I can draw with clay and glazes. I can draw with fabrics. I can draw with pencils and crayons and paints. There's a mosaic down there, and I still was drawing with the pieces as I was doing the mosaic. I was still drawing. So even though I don't actually draw with a pencil very much, most things that I do, I find myself making.
So this is fascinating to me. It sounds to me like these waves of creation or creativity have hit you and have drawn you in different directions as an artist. And so I think my question then would be, are you more attentive to a specific medium or mediums now, today, or is it rather as the impulse strikes you?
I'm impulsive. Yeah, I go from one thing to another, and then I'll have an idea, and it's like, oh, I got to get into that, and then I get a job doing a mural, and it's like, okay, well, I have to do this. And I mean, I just finished one of the most fun jobs I've ever had. It's like, I love doing that. I get into the little animals and details. It was for a veterinary office, and so we had lots of little animals.
Oh, I love it.
And apparently that's what I'm good at, is the animals. I don't do people, and I don't like doing things that man made. I like nature and animals.
So that was sort of, I think, where I was headed was, we spoke just before we began this interview, and I asked how to characterize your different art forms, and it does seem like you have this fine art to be hung in a gallery, and then there's this more commercial aspect, yet still fine art. Sounds to me how is the way you had characterized your faux finishing or your murals, etc.
Right.
So can you speak to perhaps, are those separate impulses, and or how does this commercial side affect what you're able then to do in terms of your more fine art gallery specific work?
I've had a theme throughout my life where I usually go toward trees. You'll notice there's a lot of trees, and if it's not trees, it's probably green. And I was working at a nursery, a plant nursery, when they had someone come in and faux finish the gift shop. And she, on top of a door frame, she painted a little bird's nest with a bird in it, and I went, I can do that. And that's when I started faux finishing. I've had 4 trainings in that all over the country. As soon as I started doing the faux finishing is something that anybody can learn. Any house painter could learn faux finishing, but there is an art to it, because you got to make it go with the interior design and blah blah. There's a certain artisticness, But that developed into the murals as well, and not anybody can do murals. That's something that requires a knack.
Is there a blurring of that space between the mural and the faux finishing that you are doing on these commercial jobs? For example, I'm thinking of the images I saw of the fireplace surrounds. That to me is a faux finish, and yet I also saw one that almost kind of had a landscape growing out of it as at the same time.
Yeah, you're thinking of the Tahoe one?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was, okay, that was probably the second most fun job I've ever had. Yeah, that was pretty cool. I got that job because they had a beam that had been painted white and they wanted it painted to look like wood, and so I did
your wood grain is
faux bois.
Stunning.
So I did the wood grain on there, and then they had this fireplace and they didn't know what they were doing with it. The homeowners were, just completely lost as to what to do with this. And right out their window is this spectacular view of Tahoe. And they said, well, can you just put Tahoe there? I'm like, sure, let me have it. And so it was fabulous. And I just, I'm telling you, it's so much fun to be allowed to just be given an idea and be allowed to run with it. Those are my favorite clients, when they say, well, I want this. That's what happened with the vet's office that I just finished, the veterinarian's office, is that, she said, I'm from California, I want a California wall. And so I've got the California cliffs there, and then I've got a vineyard, and then I've got a lupin field, and then I've got the forest, and then we've got Job's Peak, which is a view close to right outside her window. So,
You've made almost a cross section from sea to Sierra.
Yeah,
I love it.
sea to the Nevada desert.
Yeah, I love it.
So, so and I use a lot of the faux finishing techniques in my murals. In fact, when I first started doing murals, I only used faux finishing glaze. I didn't use paint. And I love it because they look really cool that way, but it's really time consuming because it dries slowly, and so, and it's like most people don't want to pay extra for more time.
But it's adding dimension to the work.
It adds a lot of dimension.
Itself. Oh,
it adds a lot of
fascinating.
dimension.
That's fascinating. So, the folks that you're working for then are obviously inspired and probably quite thankful for the work that you're doing. And that leads me to ask, where do you gather your inspiration? You've already sort of mentioned that. Is there an artist, though, on top of scenes that may inspire you? And then finally, I'd like to know what you as an artist hope to communicate or inspire in your audience.
I'm really flattered that you asked that, but you mentioned earlier, you mentioned the word form. You were going to ask me about form, and I'm like, I can't speak to form. I don't know about form. And I thought, well, form is just the three-dimensional part of art. And, even though most of the time, particularly with painting or with the fabrics, it's two-dimensional, so it's shape. The idea is to make it look three-dimensional, which is what the part that's fun for me, is making something two-dimensional look three-dimensional. Or in the case of the birds and the dog, making it look real. That's the fun part for me, is making it look real. As far as my inspiration goes, there's not a particular artist. I like a lot of people. I admire some of the old masters, Leonardo and Michelangelo. It was the thrill of a lifetime when I finally got to go see the Sistine Chapel, But it's not like I don't try to emulate anybody. I just when somebody asks me to paint the California coast, I find some photos to use for reference, and I compile, I make a composition from these photos, and that's what I do. And when the fabric things, the little mini quilts here, I had joined an art quilt group, and every month somebody would throw out an idea, and we would all do something around this idea. Like this one right here was supposed to be farms or ranches.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was all proud of myself because this was kind of abstract. And I don't usually do abstract. So for me, that was a stretch to do something abstract that actually I thought came out kind of cool, because I'm usually busy with those little details, trying to make it look real. And so that was kind of fun.
And so just to sort of return then to my question, you spoke to your inspiration. Is there something that you would want me or other audience members to feel or appreciate in general from your work? Are you painting with intent?
Usually, no. No, I don't like competition. I won't enter any competitive shows because art is too subjective to be objectified. And I just, I don't think it's fair for one person to say this person's work is better than that person's work because you just like that person's work better. When people come to me and they say, well, why should I pick you instead of this other faux finisher? I'm like, you should only pick me if you like my work better. If you like her work better, go hire her. Don't hire me if you don't like my work better. I don't want to compete. I don't live for accolades. I don't need you to ogle over my stuff. I do what I feel like doing. And if you want to hire me, that's great. I love doing commission work. I love trying to find what it is somebody's looking for and accomplish that. To me, that is the most rewarding thing, is if, like this veterinarian, I did the vineyard and I put chickens in the vineyard. She has chickens at home and she was thrilled to pieces over these silly little chickens. They're just chickens and most of them are like this big on the wall. But she loved them. And it's like, that is the most rewarding thing to me. It's like, she liked it, she's happy, I'm happy.
Wonderful.
And I mean, each one of these, most of these quilts were done because of whatever the suggestion was in the group. Some of them I did because I felt like it, like a couple of those tree ones over there because I have to do trees. Because everything is trees.
Well, this is a nice prologue to your artwork, and we'll be able to look at separately different pieces together. Thanks for talking with me, and your show is here for the month of June, and folks can follow you on Instagram.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, thanks a bunch, Lori.
Thank you.